My best friend read my childhood diary, broke into my apartment, hacked the university system, and sent my childhood trauma to everyone I know. When I begged her to stop, she grabbed my arm and screamed, "You'll thank me later." I didn't say a word. That was 4 months ago. Today, she's institutionalized. My friend Nancy has always been a feral little gremlin. One time when we were on a walk, a cute guy smiled at me and she literally started barking like a dog and yelling "predator" over and over until he practically ran away. Another time, I visited her on her first day of work in the local Starbucks when a man in front of me said "good morning" to her. "Don't harass me with your eye contact," she yelled, before spitting into his coffee. And don't get me wrong, it was always super embarrassing. But overall, I thought Nancy was a good person who would eventually grow out of it. Spoiler alert, she never did. A few weeks later, her parents cut her off after she cut the brakes of her 17-year-old brother's car, all over finding a rubber in his room, because to her, that meant he was taking advantage of young and impressionable girls. And since they were her only source of income, she now had nothing, because she was physically unable to hold a job too. So I did what any rational 18-year-old would do. I offered to pay her tuition for her, with the permission of my overly generous parents. I announced this to her over dinner. She didn't hug me, smile, or even say thanks. "That's cool," was all she said, before continuing to eat her dinner. I felt a little hurt because it took a lot of convincing from my parents, but I didn't want to make her feel like my love was conditional, so I just told her it was no problem. Luckily, when I went home that night, I got a text. It was her. I find it hard to express gratitude sometimes, but I really appreciate it. That made me smile. And that's when I knew Nancy was kind-hearted, just a little misunderstood, and mentally ill. So we continued to be best friends, until 2 months in when I met my boyfriend, Zach. I knew Nancy would insist on meeting him, so I gave him a full debrief on what she was like and how to best interact with her. I knew things were good when we were all hanging out together, and he went from his chatty, friendly self to completely quiet and reserved. The contrast was so obvious I had to stop myself from giggling. But I guess Nancy's wrath is unavoidable, because that's when I took off my jumper. "You are so beautiful," Zach said, with a flirty smile on his face. That's when Nancy narrowed her eyes at him. Zach immediately closed his mouth. He swallowed, face turning red like he'd been caught. "This is what happens when you shave your arms," she said. I raised an eyebrow, because I genuinely didn't know what the F she was talking about. "You know, Lily," she angled her entire body towards me. "I didn't want to say anything, but now I have to. You've been brainwashed by the patriarchy, and now you're supporting kitty fiddlers." Well, this wasn't my first rodeo with Nancy and her antics, so I just smiled and nodded, hoping she would shut up soon. Luckily, she did, and for the rest of the day, neither me or Zach said anything. We just let her do the talking. I was honestly planning on forgetting about her little comment. I was lying beside Zach at 3 a.m. when she called me. "Lily, I need to tell you something." Her voice was shaky, hysterical. I honestly thought someone had died. "The only reason Zach likes you is because you look like a child, and you are 100% to blame for his kitty fiddling behavior, because you shave and refuse to gain weight." She was on speakerphone, and Zach's face twisted in disbelief. "Nancy, I'm really tired. Can we talk about this later? The only reason I'm telling you this is because I love you," she interrupted, clearly loving the sound of her own voice. "Please think critically for once. Your boyfriend is a predator and you're a victim." By this point, I was ready to hang up and never speak to her again, but her call was so amusing that I decided to let her continue. "You know why you shave, right? It's because being hairless makes you feel safe. It makes you feel like that moment when you were a child and your neighbor stole your innocence didn't happen. But that's exactly what predators look for." Suddenly, the room was spinning. Zach grabbed my phone, hung up, and immediately held me while I violently cried in his arms. He didn't say anything, but I just knew that he wasn't judging me. When my tears finally ran out, he whispered into my ear that I would be safe with him, and I ended up just falling asleep, drooling in his lap. I didn't know it at the time, but Zach was about to make Nancy pay, and my life was about to change forever. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow and exposed. Zach had made coffee and was sitting at the edge of my bed looking concerned. The rich aroma filled the room, but I couldn't muster any appetite. I tried to smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. "We need to talk about what happened last night," he said gently. "How did Nancy know about what happened to you as a kid?" I shook my head, still confused myself. "I never told her. I never told anyone." My voice cracked. "The only person who knew was my mom, and she passed away 3 years ago." I remembered how my mother had held me when I finally told her, years after it happened, promising that she would protect me, and that it wasn't my fault. Zach's expression darkened. "Then how did Nancy know? That's not something someone could just guess." I grabbed my phone and saw 15 missed calls from Nancy, plus a string of texts ranging from apologetic to accusatory. The last one made my blood run cold. "I found your childhood diary when I was staying at your place last month. I was trying to protect you." She had read my diary, the one place I had felt safe enough to write about what happened, the one thing I had kept private all these years, and she had used it as a weapon against me and Zach. I felt violated all over again, like my most private thoughts had been ransacked and exposed. "I think we need to distance ourselves from Nancy," Zach said, his voice firm but gentle. "What she did was a massive violation of your privacy." I nodded, still in shock. "I know, she has no one else. My parents are paying for her education. What will happen to her?" Zach took my hand. "That's not your responsibility. She crossed a line, Lily, a serious one." I knew he was right, but years of enabling Nancy's behavior made it hard to just cut her off. Still, I decided to at least take a break from her. I texted her that I needed space and would contact her when I was ready, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed. Her response was immediate and alarming. "He's already isolating you from your friends. Classic abuser tactic. I'm coming over." I showed Zach the text, and we decided to leave my apartment for the day. We went to his place, ordered takeout, and tried to have a normal day. But around 6 p.m., my phone started blowing up with calls from my neighbor. "Your friend Nancy is trying to break into your apartment," my neighbor Tara said when I finally answered. "She's screaming about saving you from some guy. Should I call the police?" I panicked and told Tara to call the police. I wasn't about to let Nancy break into my apartment in some misguided rescue mission. Zach drove me back to my place, and we arrived just as a police car was pulling up. Nancy was still there, pounding on my door and yelling about saving me from the predator. The neighbors had all come out to watch the spectacle, standing in their doorways with expressions ranging from concern to annoyance. When Nancy saw me with Zach, she completely lost it. She lunged at him, screaming that he was keeping me prisoner. The police officers, a tall guy named Officer Reynolds and a shorter woman named Officer Chen, had to physically restrain her. I was mortified, standing there in the hallway while Nancy thrashed and screamed like she was possessed. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," Officer Chen said firmly, maintaining her grip on Nancy's arm. Nancy just kept screaming about how Zach was a predator, and I was being manipulated. I had to explain to the officers that Nancy was having some kind of episode and that she wasn't supposed to be at my apartment. I didn't press charges. I couldn't bring myself to do that to her, despite everything, but they gave her a stern warning about trespassing. After the police left, taking Nancy with them to drive her home, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained. Zach sat beside me, not saying anything, just being there. I couldn't stop thinking about how Nancy had read my diary. That diary had been my safe space, the only place I could process what happened to me as a child, and she had violated that privacy in the worst way possible. "I need to talk to my parents," I finally said. "They're still paying for her tuition. They need to know what's happening." Zach nodded. "Want me to stay while you call them?" I did. My hands were shaking as I dialed my dad's number. When he answered, I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained what had happened, leaving out the details about my childhood trauma, just saying that Nancy had invaded my privacy in a serious way and was now harassing me and my boyfriend. My dad was quiet for a moment. "Lily, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about Nancy," he said. "Your mother and I have been worried about this friendship for years. We only agreed to pay for her education because we thought it might help her, and because you seemed so determined to help her." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My parents had seen the problems all along but had respected my decision to maintain the friendship. Now they were giving me permission to step back. "We'll continue paying for this semester," my dad said. "But after that, Nancy needs to figure things out on her own. You've done more than enough for her." After hanging up, I felt both relieved and guilty. Nancy had been my friend for so long, and despite her behavior, I still cared about what happened to her. But I also knew I needed to protect myself. The next day, I decided to go to Nancy's apartment to talk things through face to face. Zach wasn't thrilled with the idea, but he understood I needed closure. He insisted on driving me there and waiting in the car, just in case things went south again. Nancy's apartment was even messier than usual when she opened the door. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying all night. For a moment, I felt that familiar pull of sympathy. "Can I come in?" I asked. She nodded, stepping aside. The place smelled like stale pizza and unwashed clothes. Textbooks were scattered across the floor, and her laptop was open on the coffee table, displaying some conspiracy theory website about signs your boyfriend is a predator. "Nancy, we need to talk about what happened," I said, sitting on the edge of her couch. "You read my diary. You used my trauma against me. That's not what friends do." She didn't apologize. Instead, she launched into a rambling explanation about how she was just trying to protect me, how Zach was showing all the signs of being an abuser, how I was blind to the danger. I let her talk, realizing with each passing minute that there was no getting through to her. Her reality was completely different from mine. "My parents will continue paying for this semester," I finally said when she paused for breath. "But after that, you're on your own, and I think we need to take a break from our friendship." Her face contorted with anger. "He's turned you against me," she spat. "This is exactly what abusers do. Isolate their victims from friends and family." I stood up, suddenly tired of the whole situation. "No, Nancy, you did this. Not Zach. You." I walked to the door, turning back one last time. "Please don't contact me for a while. I need space." As I walked back to Zach's car, I felt both sad and relieved. A chapter of my life was ending, but maybe that was for the best. The next few weeks were peaceful. I focused on my classes, spent time with Zach, and reconnected with friends I'd neglected because of Nancy's behavior. I'd forgotten how nice it was to hang out with people without constantly worrying about what they might say or do. Then the texts started. At first, they were just from Nancy, alternating between angry accusations and tearful apologies. I didn't respond to any of them, but then I started getting messages from numbers I didn't recognize, all saying similar things. "Check on your boyfriend. Do you know where Zach goes at night? He's cheating on you with younger girls." I showed the messages to Zach, who was as confused as I was. "This has to be Nancy," he said. "She's trying to create problems between us." I agreed, but the seed of doubt had been planted. What if there was something I didn't know about Zach? We'd only been dating for a short time. I hated that Nancy was getting into my head, but I couldn't help wondering. My answer came a few days later when I was at the campus library. I was deep in the stacks, looking for a book for my psychology paper, when I overheard two girls talking on the other side of the shelves. "So this crazy girl offered me $50 to text some chick named Lily about her boyfriend cheating," one of them said. "She showed me a picture of him and everything. Said it was to save her friend from an abusive relationship." "Did you do it?" the other girl asked. "Hell no. She seemed unhinged. I reported her to campus security." I stepped around the corner, startling them. "Was her name Nancy?" I asked. The girl nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah. How did you know?" "I'm Lily," I said simply. Their expressions shifted to understanding. The first girl, who introduced herself as Jade, showed me the messages Nancy had sent her, trying to recruit her for this weird harassment campaign. She'd apparently approached several students with the same offer. I thanked them for the information and immediately called campus security to file my own report. The officer I spoke to, a kind older man named Officer Morales, told me they'd already received multiple complaints about Nancy's behavior, and we're looking into it. When I told Zach what I discovered, he was furious. She's trying to destroy our relationship, he said. This is beyond just being a bad friend. This is harassment. I agreed, but I still felt responsible for Nancy in a way. She clearly needed help, professional help that I couldn't provide. First, decided to reach out to her parents, even though we'd never been close. I found her mom's number in my old contacts and called her the next day. The conversation was difficult. Nancy's mom, Mrs. Patel, sounded tired and resigned as I explained what had been happening. She wasn't surprised, which was the saddest part. Nancy has always struggled with boundaries, she said. We've tried to get her help over the years, but she refuses to acknowledge there's a problem. After what she did to her brother's car, we had to take a step back for our own safety. I felt a new wave of sympathy for Nancy's family. They'd been dealing with this behavior much longer than I had. I'm worried about her, I admitted. She's going to end up in serious trouble if she keeps this up. Mrs. Patel sighed. I know. We're trying to convince her to come home and get treatment. Thank you for calling, Lily. And I'm sorry for whatever she's put you through. After that call, I felt like I'd done what I could. Nancy wasn't my responsibility anymore. I blocked her number and all the unknown numbers that had been texting me and tried to move on with my life. For a while, it seemed to work. Midterms came and went, and I was too busy studying to worry about Nancy. Zach and I grew closer, and I even introduced him to my dad, who approved immediately. Life was getting back to normal. Then one evening, I came home from class to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open, afraid of what I might find inside. The place had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, clothes scattered everywhere, books thrown off shelves. My laptop was missing, along with my external hard drive that contained all my schoolwork and personal photos. I called the police immediately, and they came to take a report. There was no sign of forced entry, which meant whoever had broken in either had a key or knew how to pick locks. I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who was responsible. Do you have any idea who might have done this? Officer Reynolds asked. He was the same officer who had responded to the incident with Nancy a few weeks earlier. I hesitated, not wanting to accuse Nancy without proof. I have a suspicion, but I'm not sure. He nodded understandingly. If you think of anything specific, let us know. After the police left, Zach came over to help me clean up. As we were putting books back on shelves, I noticed something odd. My childhood photo albums had been opened, and several pictures were missing, specifically photos of me as a child with my neighbor, the one who had hurt me. I hadn't even realized those pictures were still in there. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Zach, I said quietly, I think Nancy took these photos. He looked at the empty spaces in the album. Why would she take old photos? I don't know, but it can't be good. I sat down heavily on my bed. What is she planning to do with them? The answer came the next day in the form of a campus-wide email. Nancy had somehow hacked into the university system and sent a message to every student and faculty member. The subject line was, Predator Alert, and the body contained scanned pages from my diary, along with the photos of me and my neighbor. She had connected random dots to create a conspiracy theory that Zach was somehow connected to my childhood abuser, based solely on the fact that they both had dark hair. The email was removed within hours, and the university sent out an apology for the security breach, but the damage was done. People had seen my most private thoughts, my most painful memories. I couldn't face going to class, knowing that everyone had read about what happened to me. Zach was livid. This is criminal, he said, pacing my apartment. She hacked into your private diary, stole your property, broke into the university system. She needs to be arrested. I was too numb to feel angry yet. All I felt was violated, exposed in the most brutal way possible. I curled up on my couch, unable to stop crying. Zach called my dad, who drove 3 hours to be with me. When he arrived, his face was a mask of controlled fury. We're going to fix this, he promised, sitting beside me. Nancy has gone too far. The university took the incident seriously. They suspended Nancy pending an investigation and provided me with resources for counseling and academic accommodation. The Dean of Students, Dr. Martinez, personally called to apologize and assure me that they were taking steps to ensure nothing like this could happen again. The police were involved now too. Detective Sarah Wilson was assigned to my case, a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes who specialized in cybercrime and harassment. She took my statement and collected evidence, including the stolen diary, pages and photos that Nancy had scanned. We have enough here for multiple charges, she told me. Breaking and entering, theft, cybercrime, harassment. She won't get away with this. I should have felt relieved, but I just felt sad. How had things gotten so out of control? How had Nancy, who I'd once considered my best friend, turned into someone capable of such cruelty? A week after the email incident, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me entering my apartment building, clearly taken that same day. The message below it read, I'm watching you. I'll save you from him even if you don't want to be saved. I showed the message to Detective Wilson, who immediately increased patrols around my building. She suggested I stay somewhere else for a while, just to be safe. I moved in with Zach temporarily, bringing only what I needed for classes and leaving the rest behind. Nancy was becoming increasingly unpredictable. Campus security reported that she'd been spotted lurking around my usual classrooms, despite her suspension. She'd created multiple fake social media accounts to continue spreading her conspiracy theories about Zach. Some people were actually starting to believe her wild claims, simply because of how confidently she presented them. One of my professors, Dr. Keller, pulled me aside after class one day. Lily, I'm concerned about you, she said. A young woman came to my office hours claiming to be your friend. She said some very disturbing things about your boyfriend and insisted I should help save you. I sighed, explaining the situation. Dr. Keller was understanding and promised to alert security if Nancy showed up again. It was exhausting having to explain my personal drama to everyone, but at least people were being supportive. The breaking point came when Nancy somehow found out where Zach lived. We were having dinner one night when we heard glass shattering in the living room. A brick had been thrown through his window with a note attached, "Release Lily or face the consequences." Zach called the police while I hid in the bathroom, shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It felt felt dangerous. When officers arrived, they found Nancy sitting on the curb outside, waiting calmly like she'd done nothing wrong. They arrested her on the spot. I thought that would be the end of it. Nancy would face consequences, get the help she needed, and I could finally move on with my life. But things are never that simple. Nancy's parents hired a lawyer who argued that she was mentally ill and needed treatment, not punishment. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, and Nancy was diagnosed with several conditions that explained her behavior. Instead of jail time, she was committed to a psychiatric facility for treatment. I should have felt relieved, but something still didn't sit right. The Nancy I knew was unstable, yes, but she was also manipulative and calculating. The way she had systematically targeted me and Zach, the planning that went into breaking into my apartment and hacking the university system, it didn't seem like someone who wasn't in control of their actions. My suspicions were confirmed when I received a letter from the psychiatric facility. It was from Nancy, written in her neat, precise handwriting. Dear Lily, by the time you read this, I'll be out. The doctors here are so easy to fool. Just take the meds, say the right things, and they think you're cured. I'm not giving up on saving you. You'll thank me when this is all over. Your true friend, Nancy. I showed the letter to Detective Wilson, who promised to follow up with the facility, but it was too late. Nancy had already been released into her parents' care, with the understanding that she would continue outpatient treatment. The next day, I was at the campus coffee shop with my friend Megan when I noticed a familiar figure watching us from across the street. Nancy was back, and she was watching me. I pointed her out to Megan, who immediately took a photo with her phone as evidence. We should leave, Megan said, looking worried. She gives me the creeps. We gathered our things quickly, but as we stepped outside, Nancy approached us, smiling like nothing had happened between us. Lily, I've missed you so much, she said, trying to hug me. I stepped back, keeping my distance. Nancy, you're not supposed to be near me, I said firmly. There's a restraining order. Her smile didn't falter. Oh, that silly thing? I'm all better now, Lily. The doctor said so. We can go back to being friends. Megan stepped between us. She doesn't want to talk to you. Leave her alone before I call campus security. Nancy's expression darkened. You're one of them, aren't you? One of the ones he's brainwashed. Against me. She reached into her bag, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might have a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a stack of flyers. I caught a glimpse of my face on them, along with Zach's, under a headline that read, Missing. Have you seen this girl? She is being held against her will. I'm handing these out all over campus, Nancy said proudly. Someone will help me save you. Megan grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Now. She pulled me away as I stood there in shock, unable to process what was happening. We went straight to campus security, who called the police. Officer Chen arrived quickly, taking the flyer Megan had grabbed and listening to our account of the encounter. This is a clear violation of the restraining order, she said. We'll find her. But Nancy had vanished by the time they started looking. The damage was already done, though. Her flyers were everywhere, posted on bulletin boards, left on car windshields, handed out to students. People were starting to look at me strangely, whispering as I passed. Some even asked if I was okay or if I needed help escaping from Zach. The rumors spread like wildfire. Nancy had created a narrative so compelling that people who didn't even know me were concerned. She'd included just enough truth, references to my childhood trauma, quotes from my stolen diary, to make her lies seem credible. Zach was bearing the brunt of it. Someone had keyed his car with the word predator, and he'd received threatening messages from anonymous accounts. His reputation was being destroyed by Nancy's campaign. We need to fight back, he said one night as we sat in his apartment, the curtains drawn against prying eyes. We can't just keep reacting to whatever she does next. He was right. It was time to take control of the situation. I decided to tell my story, the real story, on my own terms. With help from Megan, who was studying journalism, I wrote a detailed account of my friendship with Nancy, her escalating behavior, and the harassment campaign she'd launched against me and Zach. We published it on the university's student blog, with permission from the administration. I was terrified of putting myself out there, of making myself vulnerable again, but I knew it was necessary. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from students and faculty alike. People came forward with their own stories of Nancy's bizarre behavior, the girl from the library who she'd tried to recruit, a professor she'd accused of discrimination, a barista she'd thrown hot coffee at for looking at her wrong. The tide of public opinion turned quickly. Where people had been suspicious of Zach before, they now understood he was a victim of Nancy's delusions. Campus security increased their presence around both our apartments, and friends organized a buddy system so neither of us had to walk anywhere alone. Nancy's parents reached out to me, devastated by what their daughter had done. They had believed she was taking her medication and attending therapy sessions, but she'd been lying to them. They promised to get her proper help this time, somewhere she couldn't manipulate her way out of. For a few days, things were quiet. Nancy seemed to have gone underground after my blog post went viral. I started to hope that maybe, finally, this nightmare was ending. Then Zach disappeared. He was supposed to meet me for lunch between classes, but he never showed up. His phone went straight to voicemail. None of his roommates had seen him since morning. It wasn't like him to just vanish without a word. I tried not to panic, telling myself he might have gotten caught up in a study group or had his phone die. But as hours passed with no word, the knot in my stomach tightened. I called the police, but they said he hadn't been missing long enough to file a report. I was sitting in my apartment, trying to decide what to do next, when my phone buzzed with a text from Zach's number. Come to the old boathouse by the lake. Come alone or you'll never see him again. My hands shook as I stared at the message. The boathouse was an abandoned structure on the edge of campus, a relic from when the university had a rowing team decades ago. It was isolated, especially in the evening, with dense woods on one side and the lake on the other. I knew I should call the police, but what if Nancy hurt Zach while they were mobilizing? What if she was watching and saw me make the call? I couldn't take that risk. I grabbed my pepper spray and a flashlight, then texted Megan with my location and the situation, asking her to call the police if she didn't hear from me in 30 minutes. It wasn't much of a safety plan, but it was better than nothing. The walk to the boathouse was the longest of my life. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the path. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump. By the time I reached the weathered wooden structure, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The interior was dim, smelling of damp wood and stagnant water. Dust motes danced in the few rays of sunlight that penetrated the grimy windows. "Zach?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly. "Are you here?" "He's fine," came Nancy's voice from the shadows. She stepped forward, and I could see she was holding something in her hand. Not a weapon, but a phone. Zach's phone. "Where is he?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Nancy smiled, that same eerie smile she'd had when showing me her flyers. "He's safe, for now. I just needed to get you away from him so we could talk." I glanced around the boathouse, but there was no sign of Zach. "You don't have him, do you?" I realized. This was just a trick to get me here. Her smile faltered slightly. "I'm trying to help you, Lily. Why can't you see that? He's dangerous." "No, Nancy. You're the dangerous one." I took a step back toward the door. "I'm leaving. Don't contact me again." Her face contorted with anger. "You're not going anywhere." She lunged forward, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "Not until you listen to me." I tried to pull away, but she held on tight, her nails digging into my skin. "Let go of me," I shouted, fumbling for my pepper spray with my free hand. "You're just like all the others," she hissed. "Brainwashed. Blind. I thought you were different, Lily. I thought you were special." Before I could respond, the boathouse door burst open. Zach stood there, with 2 campus security officers behind him. "Let her go, Nancy," one of the officers said firmly. "It's over." Nancy's grip on my arm loosened in shock. "How did you find you?" Zach finished for her. "Megan showed me your text. Did you really think Lily would come here alone without telling anyone?" I took advantage of Nancy's momentary confusion to wrench my arm free and step away from her. The security officers moved forward, placing themselves between us. "Nancy Patel, you're under arrest for violating a restraining order and for attempted kidnapping," the officer said, taking out handcuffs. Nancy's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the friend I used to know. Lost, confused, hurt. Then the mask slipped back into place and she was screaming about conspiracies again, about how everyone was against her, about how she was the only one who could see the truth. As the officers led her away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that it was over, sadness for the friendship I'd lost, and a lingering unease about how things had escalated so dramatically. Zach put his arm around me as we watched the security car drive away. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I think I will be, eventually." The day after the boathouse incident, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My arm was bruised where Nancy had grabbed me, and I had this weird emotional hangover that made everything seem foggy. Zach stayed over, sleeping on my couch because he didn't want to leave me alone. I found him in the morning making pancakes in my tiny kitchen, looking all domestic and stuff. It was weirdly normal considering everything that had happened. "How you feeling?" he asked, sliding a plate toward me. The pancakes had chocolate chips in them, which was exactly what I needed. I shrugged, not really sure how to answer. I was relieved Nancy was finally getting proper help, but also sad about how everything had played out. It's complicated losing someone who is your best friend for years, even if they turned out to be completely unhinged. Campus security called later that morning to update us. Nancy was being held for psychiatric evaluation, and this time they were taking no chances. The restraining order was still in effect, and they'd added extra security measures to make sure she couldn't access university systems again. They also mentioned that the police wanted to interview me again to finalize their report. "Do you want me to come with you?" Zach asked when I told him about the interview. I nodded. Having him there would make it easier to get through all the questions without breaking down. We headed to the campus police station around noon, where Detective Wilson was waiting for us. She had this gentle but no-nonsense vibe that made me feel safe. "I know this is difficult," she said as we sat down in her office, "but I need to go through everything one more time to make sure we have all the details correct." For the next 2 hours, I rehashed the whole nightmare, from Nancy reading my diary to the boathouse confrontation. Zach held my hand through the worst parts, especially when I had to explain how Nancy had used my childhood trauma against me. Detective Wilson took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting me talk. "You've been incredibly brave through all of this," she said when I finished. "Based on everything you've told me and the evidence we've collected, Nancy will be facing serious charges once she's deemed mentally fit to stand trial." I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me wanted Nancy to face consequences for what she'd done, but another part just felt sorry for her. Mental illness or not, she'd made choices that hurt people, but I couldn't help wondering if things might have turned out differently if she'd gotten proper help sooner. The next few days were a blur of meetings with university administrators, counseling sessions, and trying to catch up on the schoolwork I'd fallen behind on. The Dean of Students, Dr. Martinez, assured me that my professors would be understanding about extensions on assignments. She also offered to help me change dorms if I didn't feel safe in my current apartment. "I think I'm okay where I am," I told her. "Nancy's not getting out anytime soon, and I don't want to disrupt my life more than it already has been." She nodded, looking relieved. "That's a healthy attitude, Lily, but please know the offer stands if you change your mind." My friends rallied around me in ways I never expected. Megan organized a study group to help me catch up on missed classes. My roommate Tara started walking with me to early morning classes so I wouldn't have to go alone. Even people I barely knew reached out with messages of support after reading my blog post. A week after the boathouse incident, I got a call from Nancy's mom. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. "Lily, I hope it's okay that I called," Mrs. Patel said, her voice tired but steady. "I wanted to update you on Nancy's condition." She explained that Nancy had been transferred to a specialized facility in another state, one with experience treating her specific combination of disorders. The doctors had started her on a new medication regimen and intensive therapy. "She asked me to tell you she's sorry," Mrs. Patel said. "I know that probably doesn't mean much right now, but I thought you should know." I thanked her for the update, not sure what else to say. It was good that Nancy was getting help, but an apology delivered through her mother felt hollow after everything she'd put me through. After hanging up, I sat on my bed staring at the wall for a long time. Zach found me like that when he came over later, still in the same position, lost in thought. "Everything okay?" he asked, sitting beside me. I told him about Mrs. Patel's call. "I don't know how to feel about any of this anymore," I admitted. "Part of me is still angry, but part of me just feels empty." Zach put his arm around me. "That's normal. You've been through a lot. It's going to take time to process everything." He was right, of course. My therapist had said something similar in our last session, that trauma doesn't just disappear overnight, that healing isn't linear. Some days would be better than others, and that was okay. The next morning, I woke up with a sudden urge to reclaim my space. Nancy had invaded every aspect of my life, my apartment, my privacy, my relationships. It was time to take it all back. I started by rearranging my furniture, moving my bed to the opposite wall and switching the positions of my desk and bookshelf. It wasn't a huge change, but it made the place feel different, like it was mine again. Next, I tackled my social media. I'd been avoiding it since Nancy's campaign against me, afraid of what people might be saying. But when I finally logged in, I found mostly messages of support. I spent an hour blocking trolls and deleting nasty comments, then posted a simple update. "Thanks for all the support. I'm doing okay and focusing on moving forward." The responses were immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Friends and classmates commented with heart emojis and encouraging words. Even a few professors chimed in with supportive messages. It felt good to reconnect, to remember that most people were actually decent. That afternoon, Zach and I decided to go for coffee at the campus shop, the same one where Nancy had first started her weird accusations about him. It felt important somehow, like reclaiming a place that had been tainted by bad memories. "You sure you're ready for this?" Zach asked as we approached the shop. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I can't avoid places forever just because they remind me of her. The coffee shop was busy, full of students studying and chatting. A few people glanced our way when we entered, but most were too absorbed in their own conversations to notice us. We ordered our drinks and found a table by the window, the same one where we'd sat with Nancy that day. "This feels weird," I admitted, wrapping my hands around my mug, "but also kind of good, like I'm taking back control or something." Zach smiled. "That's exactly what you're doing." We sat there for over an hour, talking about normal things, classes, movies, plans for the weekend. Not once did we mention Nancy. It felt like the first step toward whatever our new normal was going to be. The next few weeks followed a similar pattern. I'd identify something that Nancy had tainted with her behavior, then deliberately reclaim it. I went back to the library where she'd recruited people to harass me. I walked past her old apartment building without flinching. I even reached out to some mutual friends who distanced themselves during the whole ordeal, rebuilding connections that had been damaged. My therapist, Dr. Reyes, called it exposure therapy with agency. The exposure part was facing the things that triggered anxiety. The agency part was doing it on my own terms, when I felt ready. "You're making remarkable progress," she told me during one session. "Many people would still be avoiding these situations entirely." I shrugged, not sure I deserved the praise. "I just don't want to let her control my life anymore." Dr. Reyes smiled. "That's exactly the right attitude." About a month after the boathouse incident, I received an official letter from the university. They'd completed their investigation and had decided to expel Nancy permanently. The letter also mentioned that they'd implemented new security measures for their email system and were reviewing their policies on student mental health support. I showed the letter to Zach when he came over that evening. "It feels like it's really over," I said. He nodded, pulling me into a hug. "It is over. She can't hurt you anymore." That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. No dreams of Nancy breaking into my apartment or hurting Zach. No reliving the boathouse confrontation. Just peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter somehow. I made coffee, opened my windows to let in the spring air, and sat down at my desk to work on a paper that was due the following week. Normal student things that had seemed impossible just a short time ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Zach. "Breakfast at the diner? I'm craving their pancakes." I smiled, typing back a quick, "Yes, please." It was becoming our Saturday morning tradition. Pancakes at the diner, then a walk around campus if the weather was nice. The diner was crowded when I arrived, but Zach had already snagged our usual booth by the window. He waved when he saw me, that goofy smile on his face that always made my heart do a little flip. "I ordered for you," he said as I slid into the booth. "Chocolate chip pancakes and extra bacon." "You know me too well," I laughed, reaching for the coffee he'd already poured for me. We fell into easy conversation, discussing plans for the upcoming summer break. Zach had been offered an internship at a local psychology clinic, and I was considering taking summer classes to catch up on credits I'd missed during the Nancy drama. "My parents said you're welcome to visit for a few weeks," I mentioned between bites of pancake. "They want to meet you properly, not just over FaceTime." Zach's face lit up. "I'd love that. Maybe after my internship ends in July?" We spent the rest of breakfast planning our summer, talking about beaches we could visit and movies we wanted to see. It felt so normal, so right. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or waiting for the next crisis. After breakfast, we decided to take advantage of the beautiful weather and walk through the campus gardens. The flowers were just starting to bloom, adding splashes of color to the greenery. Students lounged on the grass, reading or chatting in small groups. It was a perfect spring day. As we walked, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the psychology building, Dr. Martinez, the dean of students. She waved when she saw us, gesturing for us to join her. "Lily, Zach, how are you both doing?" she asked as we approached. "Better," I said honestly. "Much better." She smiled, looking genuinely pleased. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been meaning to reach out to you about something." Dr. Martinez explained that the university was forming a new committee focused on student mental health resources and crisis intervention. They wanted student representatives who had firsthand experience with these issues and she thought I might be interested. We need to do better, she said simply. What happened with Nancy showed us that there are serious gaps in our support systems. We want to fix that. I was surprised by the offer, but also intrigued. The idea of helping other students who might be struggling, of potentially preventing situations like mine from happening again, it was appealing. Can I think about it? I asked. Dr. Martinez nodded. Of course. The committee won't start meeting until next semester anyway. Just let me know when you've decided. As we continued our walk, Zach squeezed my hand. You'd be amazing at that, you know. If you wanted to do it, I wasn't so sure. I don't know if I'm qualified. I didn't exactly handle the Nancy situation perfectly. Are you kidding? You showed incredible strength and resilience. Plus, you have perspective that most people don't. That's valuable. I promised to think about it, tucking the idea away for future consideration. Right now, I was focused on finishing the semester strong and continuing my healing process. The next week brought another unexpected development. I received an email from Nancy's brother, Alex, the one whose car brakes she'd cut. He was apologizing for not reaching out sooner and asking if we could meet for coffee. He wanted to thank me for finally getting his sister the help she needed. I was hesitant at first, worried that seeing anyone connected to Nancy might trigger bad memories. But after talking it over with Dr. Reyes and Zach, I decided to meet him. It might provide some closure. We met at an off-campus cafe I'd never been to before, neutral territory. Alex looked a lot like Nancy, with the same dark hair and eyes, but his expression was open and kind in a way hers never had been. Thank you for meeting me, he said as we sat down with our drinks. I know this must be weird for you. I nodded, not sure what to say. It was definitely weird. Alex told me that he'd been following the situation from a distance, too afraid of his sister to get directly involved, but worried about what she might do. When he heard about the boathouse incident, he'd finally convinced his parents that Nancy needed more intensive help than they could provide. I should have done more sooner, he said, looking down at his coffee. Maybe if I had, you wouldn't have gone through all this. It's not your responsibility, I told him, surprised to find I actually meant it. Nancy made her own choices. We talked for about an hour, sharing stories about Nancy from different perspectives. It was strange to hear about her childhood, to learn that she'd always struggled with boundaries and paranoia. Alex mentioned that there had been incidents before, though none as serious as what she'd done to me. She's getting real help now, he assured me. The doctors think with the right medication and therapy, she might be able to live a relatively normal life eventually. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me hoped Nancy would get better, but another part was terrified of her ever being free again. I didn't share that thought with Alex, though. He had his own complicated feelings to deal with. As we were saying goodbye, Alex handed me a small package. Nancy's therapist suggested she write letters to the people she's hurt as part of her treatment. She wrote this for you. You don't have to read it if you don't want to, but I promised I'd deliver it. I took the package, not committing to anything. Thanks for meeting me, Alex. I hope things get better for your family. He smiled sadly. Me too. And Lily, I'm really sorry for everything she put you through. I placed the unopened letter in my desk drawer when I got home, not ready to read it yet. Maybe someday, but not now. For now, it was enough to know that Nancy was getting help and couldn't hurt me anymore. The semester ended on a baked note. Despite everything that had happened, I managed to maintain my GPA and even earned an A in my most difficult class. Zach and I celebrated by going out to dinner at a nice restaurant off campus, the kind of place we usually couldn't afford on student budgets. I'm proud of you, he said, raising his glass in a toast. Not just for the grades, but for everything. You're the strongest person I know. I blushed, still not used to such direct compliments. I couldn't have done it without you, or Megan, or Dr. Reyes, or any of the other people who helped me. That's what makes you strong, knowing when to lean on others. After dinner, we walked back to campus under a sky full of stars. The night was warm, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of blooming flowers. As we passed the library, the place where so much of the Nancy drama had unfolded, I realized I didn't feel anxious anymore. It was just a building now, not a site of trauma. I decided to join that committee Dr. Martinez mentioned, I told Zach as we walked. The one about student mental health resources. He smiled, squeezing my hand. That's great. What made you decide? I thought about it for a moment. I guess I want something good to come out of all this. If my experience can help improve things for other students, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. The summer passed in a blur of work, study, and healing. I took 2 summer classes to catch up on credits, worked part-time at the campus bookstore, and continued my therapy sessions with Dr. Reyes. Zach came to visit my family for 2 weeks in July, charming my dad with his knowledge of classic cars and my mom with his willingness to help in the kitchen. By the time fall semester started, I felt like a different person than I had been a year ago. Stronger, more confident, less willing to let others cross my boundaries. I'd learned the hard way that not everyone deserving of compassion deserved my trust. Nancy remained at the treatment facility, according to occasional updates from her parents. She was making progress, they said, though the road ahead was long. I wished her well from a distance, having decided that our friendship was a chapter of my life that needed to remain closed. The mental health committee turned out to be rewarding work. We met twice a month discussing ways to improve resources for students in crisis and developing protocols for identifying at-risk individuals before situations escalated. My perspective as someone who had been on both sides, trying to help a friend with mental health issues while also being victimized by that same friend, proved valuable. One evening in late October, I finally felt ready to read Nancy's letter. It had been sitting in my desk drawer for months, a physical reminder of everything that had happened. Zach was with me when I opened it, sitting beside me on my bed in case the contents were upsetting. The letter was surprisingly short, just a single page in Nancy's neat handwriting. Lily, I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. My therapist says I need to take responsibility for my actions, regardless of my mental state at the time. So that's what I'm doing. I violated your privacy, betrayed your trust, and used your trauma against you. There's no excuse for that. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong my behavior was. I hope someday you can find peace. Nancy. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or a lengthy explanation, just a simple acknowledgement of harm done, and somehow, that was enough. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. You okay? Zach asked, watching me carefully. I nodded, surprised to find I actually was. Yeah, I think I needed to hear her take responsibility, even if it's just on paper. That night, I slept better than I had in months, with no nightmares or anxiety. The next morning, I woke up feeling truly free of Nancy's shadow for the first time since everything had happened. Life went on. Zach and I grew closer, eventually moving into an off-campus apartment together after dating for a year and a half. I continued my work with the Mental Health Committee, which expanded its efforts to include peer support groups and improved crisis response training for faculty. I never saw Nancy again. Her parents moved her to another state after her release from the treatment facility, wanting a fresh start for all of them. Alex kept in touch occasionally, letting me know that she was doing better, taking her medication, holding down a part-time job, seeing a therapist regularly. Sometimes I think about the friendship we once had, before everything went wrong. There were good times mixed in with the chaos, late-night study sessions, inside jokes, the comfort of having someone who knew you completely. But those memories are tinged with the knowledge of what came later, of how thoroughly Nancy betrayed my trust. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's about boundaries, learning to set them, respect them, and recognize when others are crossing them. It's about understanding that helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, and that true friendship should lift you up, not drain you dry. But mostly, it's about resilience, about facing your worst fears and coming out the other side, changed but not broken, about building a life that's yours, surrounded by people who genuinely care about your well-being. And that's exactly what I've done.